I'm here to talk about the basic setup of a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. This is part 2 of a 6-part series on using Microsoft to set up a data analytic platform for your rapid response system. The first section dealt with just what kind of elements that you would be interested in collecting data on to begin with. And this is just how to really open the program for the first time and just set up different columns and rows to be able to have an environment where you can collect your data. If you have worked with Excel before, you can totally skip this. This is just basically how to open, label, save, and move some things around. The next video in this series will actually go into more complete treatment of different commands like selections, copies, pastings, copying formulas, pasting them, and so forth. So I'm doing this on a Macintosh, and so much like a PC or Word or Windows kind of environment, there are just different icons that you click to start yourself off. So I'm going to start off with Microsoft Excel, and you'll see when that opens up that there's an Excel menu that appears on the top of the screen, and this is the basic element called a spreadsheet. This whole thing is like this file will be given a name, and that's called a workbook, and then within a workbook you have different sheets. And so here they just give you one sheet to start with, and you can add multiple sheets, and this would be analogous to having several pieces of graph paper stapled together in a folder as part of like a project where those sheets have some relationship to one another. And so the goal here is to basically have a place where the data that you have collected can live and start to tell a story about your system as experience accumulates. And so you start out with a sheet here. If you have another sheet that you already have opened or already prepared, what you could do is you could go open recent, and actually there's one called Demo Book that I'm just going to open up because I'm going to pull data in from that one to show you how to work with a couple different spreadsheets at a time. But let's just say for example that you're going to set up a spreadsheet where you want to collect basic things like dates of calls, and so you just type in your first row there is where your column header is going to be, not where A is, but just in row 1. And so it'll be date, time, and let's say we'll talk about building or ward. I'll say ward here, and then we'll have, say, like the name of the patient and an ID number for the patient, and then let's say you're interested in criteria for why the patient was called, and then maybe what the situation was. Actually, we'll put the situation a little bit later here, and whether the patient was transferred to a higher level of care. And so what you'll end up doing is, ideally, is as your experience accumulates, every one of these rows from 2 on downward will be a different patient encounter. Now, this isn't the easiest way to enter data. So if you are looking at just a bunch of sheets and you're going to have to input all the data yourself rather than, say, somebody else doing it and send it to you, it might be easier to actually have these headings here, which are column headings, be row headings. And the reason is that as you're entering data, it's a lot easier just like type it in, hit return, and do the next and complete the next element. So for example, we're talking about, so let me make this big. See, actually down here, see how I'm dragging this little bar here for magnification? That allows us to get a little bit better resolution. But we're talking about date, time, ward, name, ID number, criteria, and whether they're transferred. So it's a lot easier if I, let's say, have 15 sheets from calls during the week or the month. It's just a lot easier to just kind of like rattle off data, hit return, and down, and then for the next patient, do that. And then what you can do is once this data here has been collected for however many patients you have, let's just say that you have it collected for, I don't know, like 6 or 8 patients, whatever this is going to turn out to be. So what I'm doing here is I'm copying, actually I'm highlighting this, and then I'm going to File, and I'm sorry, to Edit, and I'm copying it, and then I'm going to go up here and go to Edit and paste it. And so basically I'm kind of moving this data on down the line. So it looks like I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 different patients here. So what I can do is then take this data here and again go to copy or do push Control C and then go over here to the upper leftmost corner and then go to Edit and do Paste Special. And this is where you're doing different pastings, and actually push this button here called Transpose. And what that's done is that's flipped the axis of all this. And so what initially we had patients' data kind of arranged in these vertical columns, and now it is in these horizontal rows. And so this is something that you might end up doing is, every month what you might do is have all of these rows blank, and then for individual patients fill in these columns and then pick up the data and then just add it beneath here. And and as you go, you'll get up into the hundreds and thousands of patients. And for that reason, it's a whole lot easier to have the data arranged in this manner here, because there aren't going to be that many elements that you're collecting data on, and you'll always be able to view those as the first row of data here. Whereas if you did it in the transverse or the converse, what you'd have is these highlighted elements here would be in rows, and then you'd be scrolling way out to the right as you're getting into like hundreds and thousands of patients. And it's a whole lot easier just to do that in a vertical manner. The other thing I'll show you how to do, and this is something that comes up in some of the other tutorials too, is let's just put a bunch of data. I'm just going to basically cut and paste a bunch of this data down here just to kind of show you that it goes off the page. And so what I can do is I can go back up here to the first column and go to Window and select this command called Split. And what that does is it sort of splits this window, and I could put this split somewhere. And so what that enables me to do is I can scroll down into the hundreds and thousands and so forth, but that first row of data that actually identifies the elements stays the same. And so you can see I'm kind of like using the scroll to move up and down and to what it's only like 50 or so data elements, but this could be something in the thousands, and I still know what each data element is, what it belongs to, as opposed to like memorizing, it was column E, the ID number. So that's something that's pretty convenient to do, and it looks like it's been split a couple different times. You could just make that one go away, so you just have the one split across the middle there. Okay, so you'll be entering data either manually or by picking it up somewhere else. And so I'll give you an example of how to deal with that. So this is what I get from our operators every month, a sheet that looks like this. And as you can see, there's different types of events that are called, like Code 95 is a COVID E team, is our medical emergency team, and then we also have stroke alerts, which are also part of the E team. But then we have code blues as well. And so what I end up doing is the following. I end up just taking the E team calls from here and putting them in my medical emergency team or E team database. I'm sorry, let me just get rid of these things. And so when I get this log here, I'm interested in most of this data, but not all of it. And so what I'll do is I'll go to edit and then select all. And then another command that I use a lot is this one called sort and filter. And so what we'll do is we'll do a custom sorting. And what we want to do is we'll click headers because these columns have headings, is we want to sort by the type of call. And so here we have code 95s and code blues up here, and then all the rest are the E-team calls down here, or the E-team stroke alerts, and those are the ones that I want to populate my database with. And so what I'll do is, since this data has been entered by the operator, what I can do is I can just select the data piece by piece. And so what I'll do is I'll select that data. I'll do a copy command. I'll paste that in here, and then I'll go back. And so then the next thing is going to be ward, which they call department here. And then that will be kind of copied and pasted. And then we have basically name and ID number, and I've changed these to some fake name and number just to protect confidentiality. And looks like something messed up with the way I did that one. So let's just go back and fix that one. So that was the department. For some reason, they all just got pasted into, oh, actually, I wanted to just do from the E-team from here on down. They just got pasted into one cell rather than the whole array of cells. So now we're looking pretty good. And so without too much effort, I've basically cut and moved data from another sheet into this sheet. And actually, you probably noticed when I cut and pasted, I didn't go back up here to cut and copy and paste like I did initially. What I did is I used some of these commands, like copy is this Control C or whatever that mark is called, Command C on a Mac, and then that allows me to copy it, and then I just pick the square where I want this pasting to begin, and I'll just hit Command V, which is going to be my paste command. And then when I want to select like everything in a spreadsheet, like I'll do Command A, select all. You can see the commands are there. And those are just like really easy things I can do with my left hand without thinking too hard about it. And so this is kind of like how we structure our data. And then we go through the various data sheets and we assign criteria to them. So whether it's heart rate, blood pressure, neurologic status, respiratory status, etc. And then we also enter in whether they're transferred or not. And then we'll also, someone will type in what the situation is. So this was suspected stroke. This one was sinus attack. This was, I'll put SOS, suspicion of sepsis. Neurologically this one was delirious, and this person desaturated. And so here are the kind of the more granular descriptions here, but you see what I try to do is when I put criteria down, I try to restrict myself to 5 or 6 different terms. So I use neuro, heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory. I'll use chest pain as well, CP, and if there's a big bleed, I'll do bleed as well. And that's basically it as far as, then concern. And that's basically it. And so by having these criteria, restricted to just a very small subset. It's a whole lot. It's very easy to kind of track different kind of macroscopic reasons for calls over time, and that's a lot better than having these very granular and kind of idiosyncratic descriptions, because you're never going to be able to classify those over a course of a year, because you're just going to have like a zillion different descriptions, and it looks like you're going to be dealing with a zillion different categories of patients. And that's not to say that not everybody's different, but if you want to, it's kind of good just to know that, like, yeah, 50% of our calls are for blood pressure concerns, 30% are for respiratory concerns, and so forth. And that's a whole lot easier to track. And again, when someone's transferred, if there's some kind of dichotomous variable where they're transferred, it comes down to a yes or no or this or that, it's a whole lot easier just to deal with things like zeros and ones. And that's because if you want to start using things like pivot tables and starting to count frequencies and doing percentages and so forth, being able just to kind of say, okay, wait a minute, I've got like 8 elements here, I'm going to select them all, and so I'm looking down here and this tells me a count of 8, sum of 5, so I can say that 5 out of 8 of my patients are transferred. And when this gets up into things like thousands and hundreds, it's a whole lot easier just to not be able just to like sum up a bunch of ones and then compare that to a denominator, and that in seconds gives you your answer. So for example, if I had a whole lot of data here, more than I'm showing, and I'll just kind of paste some of this. I'll put a bunch of zeros in here just so things are a little bit different. And so what I can do quite easily here is, sorry, I'm just going to copy that and get rid of this. What I can do is take this whole group of data here and say, okay, I'm going to sort that by criteria. So again, custom sort. My list has headers, and it's going to be criteria. And so I can go, okay, here are my bleeds. What percentage were transferred? 4 out of 5 were transferred. Of my blood pressure patients, 1 out of 5 were transferred. All the patients who we got called for just general concern, 6 out of 8 got transferred. And just you can just kind of rattle through basic statistics pretty easily by just being able to sort and kind of use some of these counting functions that come with the spreadsheet. When you get into the thousands, this will be a little bit of a labor-intensive way, and there's a lot better routines that you can use to investigate larger numbers. But this is kind of a starting sense of what how you can structure things. So let's see, what's really important here is trying to, if you have a database that you get already, like an operator database or something that comes from maybe some business informatics office, some way of capturing some of the activity of your arrest teams or your emergency teams, as much as possible, if you can structure your data columns in the same order as the ones that are already being generated by someone else, that just makes a lot of your cutting and pasting a lot easier, because rather than picking up single columns and pasting them at a time, you can pick up huge bricks and just drop them in, and that saves a lot of time. Yeah, so that's important. The other tip is just trying to use kind of a restricted set of criteria and then expand upon the situation in another column. Dichotomous variables, things like transferred, died, coded, went to ICU, things of that sort will be important to try to kind of use restricted 0-1 variables. And the other thing too is that you can add, you'll be adding other columns as time goes. You can always do some analysis. And so, for example, if you had, say, ICU transfer date here, and so for those patients that went to the ICU, you type some of those dates in here, and then what you can do is then you can set up other analytic columns like time difference between the call, oh gosh, my typing is terrible here, and ICU transfer. In this case, what you would do is you would say, okay, subtract, start with this number, which is more recent, and subtract from that the date that the call happened. And what you can do is then for those patients that are being transferred, you can look at how many days transpired between when they were called and when they're transferred. And so it will end up as you kind of mature and as you ask different questions, you'll start adding more and more columns out here. But really kind of the most important thing is just to try to have figure out what's important ahead of time. Set up your spreadsheet to set up your data capture sheet, the one that you're taking out in the field and writing things down on. Make that reflect what you're interested in knowing later, and then setting up your spreadsheet to be able to capture those data elements. The other thing, and when you're all done, what you'll do is you'll go to File, and you will save this as spreadsheet. We'll call this one RT data. What I was going to say is this, and let's say that I've been running an RT, say, for 5 years, and so this spreadsheet here is an incredible treasure trove of information that you can use to analyze a whole lot of different things. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to do any kind of analysis on this sheet itself. What you want to do is open it up and save it as something else like RT Data 1 analysis. And so what you do is now you'll be doing some sorting, cutting, pasting, maybe changing some things, maybe getting rid of some columns just because they're in the way and adding other ones because they're more important. And whatever you do is not doing anything to damage that initial treasure trove of data, because you're working really hard to get the data right. You want to enter it in there. You'll go back and you'll understand, as you look up a patient, you might see that there's something like a little bit wrong. Maybe their date of birth or their name was just entered wrong, or the call data or whatever. And so you'll change that. And so, with those modifications and with more and more patients being added to that initial spreadsheet, the value of that information just goes through the roof. So the last thing you want to do is do anything to destroy it. And so we have a rule in our institution. I share our data sheets with 5 or 6 different people, but nobody, and they can analyze it in whatever way they want, but nobody gets to touch it, the main sheet. They can make copies on their desktop, give it a different name, play with it to their heart's content, but nobody touches the main one, myself included. So those are the main things I wanted to cover in this tutorial, just to kind of just give you some comfort in opening up document, adding data fields to columns, to rows, creating some ability to enter data, being able to pick that up, add it to another sheet, a sheet related to it, but maybe in a different dimension when you transpose it, giving you some idea that some of your data might come from other sources, in which case you want to conform your sheet generally as much as you can to those data sources, just so it's easier to kind of pick up and move data around and you won't have as many mistakes. Well, thanks. And there's definitely a lot more information about different commands and controls in the following video. And so please look at that, because I think you might find that interesting. Thanks a lot.